Your horizontal shift is going to be right by 5 pi over 6. Your vertical shift, there's none. So what that means is that the y-axis that used to cut my function pretty much in half for me has moved right 5 pi over 6. Okay, so I'm going to go to 5 pi over 6. So this is 1 pi over 6, 2 pi over 6, 3 pi over 6, 4 pi over 6, 5 pi over 6. This is the new middle of my cosine function. What that means is that my original point was right here, and now my original point is going to be here, since I'm not moving up or down. Now there's no flips or twists, so my amplitude is 1, so from here it's up 1, so this is my new point. But my period is pi over 2. Well, this is 5 pi over 6. And pi over 2 is 3 pi over 6, right? So I'm going to go right, 1, 2, 3 pi over 6. That's the distance of my period. That's all there is to it. So if I am halfway in between that, I should be at the trough on the other side, right? So if I'm halfway in between that, I should be at my trough down here. Then of course halfway between here and here, I'll cross the axes. So this is what this will look like. Alright, and then you can continue on, continuing on. Alright, you can do your domain, your range, all that stuff. Alright, 2 more. So let's try some of these out here. First thing I'm going to do is I notice there is a negative. It's in the proper format, so I'm going to put my negative here. I'm going to note this as an x-axis reflection. Very important that you notate that so you don't forget it. Your amplitude is 3. Your period is 2 pi over 2. Right? So multiply by 2, divide out your pi's, your period is 4. Horizontal shift is right by 3/2. And your vertical shift is up 1. Alright, so the first thing we do, we're going to do this guy right here, right 3/2. So that's 1.5. So here is your new axis, right? And it's up 1. So here is your new rotational axis here, I guess we could call that. It's the axis which cosine or sine is rotating around. Okay. Now this is sine. So your original point was 0, 0. That makes sine relatively easy because you just move it to here. Right? Up 1 over 1.5. Here's your new 0. So sine is probably the easier one to graph because it's just where the axes intersect. You've got a period of 4, so I'm going to go 4 units over. So 1, 2, 3, 4. Remember, these are broken up into halves. Always look at the x-axis. Tell me what your period is going to be. So this is broken up into a half. So 1.5 plus 4 is 5.5. So this is a period. Now since I'm on the sine wave, this is from the middle of the graph to the middle of the graph. That means I should be going through one crest and one trough. So if you go to the direct middle of that, so here's 1.5, right? Here's 5.5. So if you go, so it's a total distance of 8. Go 1, 2, 3, 4 over, 3.5. That's where you should be going in back through the axes. Now the question is, what shape does it make? Does it go up like this and down like this, or instead does it go down and up? Well, since you have an x-axis reflection, your first step is to go down. So you're going to go halfway in between your 2 points, and you're going to go down for an amplitude of 3. 1, 2, 3. Then halfway between 3.5, 5.5 is 4.5, and up 1, 2, 3. Now again, how I knew that is I started with an x-axis reflection. My original sine function started by going up, so this one is going to start by going down. So again, we started at 0, 0, went up 1, right 3.5, an amplitude of 3 starting with a negative, so -3, and a period of 4. Cut your period in half. That's where the middle part is, so that's where your distinction is between your crest and your trough. Cut that in half, that's where your maximums and minimums are. Okay? Last one, number 5. We've got a negative cosine. So the first thing again is the x-axis reflection. I'm going to label that thing very first. Amplitude is the number in front of cosine, so that's 1. Your period is going to be 2 pi divided by 2/3. So multiply by 3, your 2's divide out, you get 3 pi. So this one's going to be a little bit wider than the other ones. Horizontal shift is going left by 3 pi over 2. That's this guy here. Vertical shift is going down by 3. All right. So first things first, vertical shift or horizontal shift left by 3 pi over 2. Left 3 pi over 2. So here is my horizontal shift taking place. And then down by 3. So here is my vertical shift taking place. Remember, these are not asymptotes. These are simply your axes. Now my original cosine function went through 0, 1, right? Always start with the original, 0, 1. So it's going to go through right here. So I'm going to apply my x-axis reflection. Now it's here. Your amplitude is 1, so there's my point. Again, I started with the original, went to my new original, which is shifting left and down. Do your x-axis reflection and apply your amplitude. Now it says that the period on this is 3 pi. 3 pi. That's going to take me all the way over here. Here's 1 pi, 2 pi, 3 pi. That means the distance to go from the bottom of this trough to the bottom of this trough is that far. That's a pretty big distance. Go halfway in between, apply your amplitude of 1. Here's your maximum. Go halfway in between, so halfway in between 0 and -3 pi over 2 will be right here. Again, halfway the other direction, right here. So your function is really long on this one. There's your cosine function. So again, the way that we're doing this is starting off by labeling your new axes, your horizontal vertical shifts, label your new axes. And then from there, apply your reflections, your amplitude, and your period. So reflections, amplitude, period. On the period, we go the entire length of the period, divide it in half. That's where the halfway point is. Let me go up a little bit here. With sine, it's pretty easy because halfway is going to be back on the axes. With cosine, since we started graphing with either a crest or a trough, halfway is going to be the opposite. So if you start graphing with troughs, you're going to end up on a crest on the halfway point. If you start on a crest, you'll end up with a trough on the halfway point. So it's a little bit different for cosine, but it's still relatively the same idea. All right. Then of course the halfway points on cosine will be back on your x-axis. The halfway points between your extrema on your sine, or the halfway points between your zeros here on sine are going to be your extrema, your minimum and your maximum, your crest and your trough. All right, so a little bit different, but we'll make sure and practice a lot of these when we get to class. Have a good one.